every time you go to do something, ask yourself a couple questions. A, what could do this for me instead? B, who could do this for me instead? And 3, remind yourself what it is that you are worth per hour.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 244. One of the things that I'm trying to accomplish during this coronavirus pandemic is systematizing and streamlining my business in order to become a leaner and more efficient real estate investor in this new and uncertain economy. One of the ways I'd like to do that, but I don't really understand it or know how to execute on it, is through the use of virtual assistants. How do I find the right fit, and in what ways can they make my business even more successful? That's why I'm looking forward to our conversation with Amy Ransdell today. Amy is the CMO for virtual assistant provider REVA Global and lead generation company Deal Dialers. She also runs an investment team and brokerage sales team in Marietta, Georgia, and has been buying, renovating, and wholesaling homes for over 18 years. Amy's deepest passion is to empower people to grow their investment skills and entrepreneurial fortitude. And today she's going to help us do that by showing us how we can best utilize virtual assistants. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on here. I appreciate it.
Well, I've been looking forward to having you as well because I've talked about with my team using virtual assistants. I haven't figured out where they fit in or how to make them fit in. So I'm looking forward to getting your input on that. But before we go there, I want to know more about you and just how you got started investing in real estate and the type of real estate investing you're doing right now.
All right, very cool. So the honest truth of how I got started in investing, it was accidental. It wasn't the plan. I always share with people I was a biochem major that got an art degree, and then somehow I ended up being an investor broker. Right, the paths that we go through are kind of funny, right? But I was actually met a gentleman, ended up marrying him. He had a hobby interest in real estate and was buying lots of products and taking classes and all this stuff and spending a lot of money. But he wasn't really doing anything with it. And I'm very type A OC. I was always an entrepreneur from day one as a child. And so I was like, okay, I'm taking over. So I started opening the books and the courses and reaching out to all of these mentors and so forth and saying, hey, how do I, get involved at a high level? And just got the bug and never went back, right? And so for the first half of my career, I was investor only, a lot of flipping and buy and hold cash flow properties, did some boat storage rentals. We did some vacation properties, kind of a variety of mix with the goal mostly for passive income investing eventually. And then about halfway through, I got my license because I realized that was an entirely or an additional passive income stream essentially that I could create through my license, utilizing that. And then now all the way up to owning a brokerage where the majority of our agents, and we have a high volume of agents here who are all high volume investors, buying their own cash flow properties and flipping in volume, and most of their flipping is so they can buy more cash flow properties. So that's a big part of what we do, and I coach that as well. I have been a real estate coach for many, many years across the country. And in that process, we decided we needed support, and so therefore REVA Global was born. But that's me in a nutshell.
That's quite a bit. Just kind of define for us what it is your focus is right now in your business. Is it REVA Global? Is it real estate?
People ask me that question and they say, well, you do all these different things. I really don't. There's all really one synergistic thing that I do, and that's a philosophy that I operate by. And that is, what can I do in my business or in my day and how I operate that's going to get me to what I want in the most efficient way possible so that I can have scale, efficiency, and time freedom. That's what I do. So whether that's a decision in how I buy a project or not buy a project to flip or invest or buy a rental property or how I grow that brokerage, all of that has to work in favor of that philosophy. So my bigger focus is that. So I always tell people that's where I'm at, right? And so even at REVA Global, that's the philosophy that we bring to all of our clients, is that we are there to help them look at all of the stuff that they're doing and help them streamline so that they get into a place to also have scale, efficiency, and time freedom for whatever they want, right? Do they want time freedom to open up more businesses, or do they want time freedom to have more time with family or travel the world? That's different for everyone, right? We can't judge which one guy wants more time freedom for, but they should have it. So that's my big focus, really, is that I operate each one of my businesses from that perspective.
So each business is designed to help streamline the overall perspective. And I know that virtual assistants are part of that. And REVA Global stands for Real Estate Virtual Assistant. Is that correct?
It does, yeah. It started that way. Now, I'll say, if you have anybody on the call or on the podcast that's a listener that is an entrepreneur, a lot of the things that we do or provide as services as virtual assistants, they're very universal, right? So they can apply to all kinds of businesses. In fact, we even have an entire medical division at REVA Global, and obviously they're not doing anything in real estate. They're serving medical doctors that are entrepreneurs and own small medical offices. But it got started in real estate because the CEO, Bob LaChance, he and I had been coaches for many, many years. And all through those years working with people all over the country, we would hear this constant need for, I'm overwhelmed, I need to outsource, I am having a hard time figuring out what to outsource, and then when I decide to hire a virtual assistant, I don't know how to hire one or how to find one, or then they'd have bad situations for what happened when they did hire one. And so it got started with the goal to solve a need, right? That's what every business does, right? We don't sell products, those are our widgets. What we solve is, what we provide is a solution for a need. And so that's how REVA was born, was how can we solve the problem for our real estate coaching clients, and then that's just grown from there. So lots of pre-training and activity in the real estate side of things is probably the heaviest part of REVA Global.
To make sure all of our listeners understand what we're talking about to begin with, what is a virtual assistant?
I love that question, because I think I say it just rolls off my tongue because it's something I do all the time. And I don't even know how to operate in my daily life without my virtual assistants. Like, I take them for granted, or I take the process of being outsourced or being able to outsource to virtual assistants kind of for granted because I'm so used to it, right? A virtual assistant is just simply, in the most base form, is simply somebody doing things for you that you shouldn't be doing that is virtual. And that could be somebody down the road working from their dining room. That could be somebody in another state. It could be somebody in another country. It's just, the point is, they're not generally a W-2 hire sitting within your own office where you're having to provide them a desk and computer and so forth. They're working somewhere else, right? That's the most base definition.
By that definition, I have a virtual assistant.
Okay.
Which,
cool.
Thank you for making me realize that. But I always thought, okay, a virtual assistant is someone in the Philippines or overseas who you can pay $3 an hour to. What's the difference between the different types and levels of virtual assistant?
Yes, some people, and the reason I'm glad you asked the question originally of what is a virtual assistant, because some people don't even think of that. So you and I think of that because we have exposure to it. So we immediately label virtual assistant as somebody who has been outsourced to another country, right? We call and get customer service for something, and it's somebody from India talking to us, and that's what we think of, right? But some people don't even realize that that's what they should think of. So you're right. There are different types of virtual assistants. At REVA Global, all of our virtual assistants are in the Philippines. Now that you've mentioned that, it's an excellent country, very amazing culture. They have core values that match ours very much, and English is one of the primary languages there, and education is something that they highly respect in the Philippines. So when we get hires there, they're extremely talented. They're amazing, and they also have a very strong work ethic. So we love that country in general for hiring virtual assistants, but that's a type of virtual assistant, yes, is that you can outsource to another country. But now there's different ways to find those virtual assistants. There's different types of companies that you can hire them through. And so I could describe that if that would help everyone.
Please do. Continue. I mean, I'd love to understand that process a little bit better.
There's different types of, let's talk about different types of hiring platforms for hiring virtual assistants and what you might want to expect and some of the most primary things that you want to look for when you do choose to hire a virtual assistant. So first and foremost, you may just need some singular tasks done. So what I would call like contract work. And so some of us are familiar with platforms like Fiverr.com, for example. If I just need to get a video edited quickly or have a flyer made quickly, I might hop on a platform like that and hire someone virtually to just make that one item for a single price, right? That's one type of virtual assistant. Another type of virtual assistant might be that you hire someone for a few hours here or there, maybe on a short-term contract. And then there are types of virtual assistants where you're actually hiring somebody as a true dedicated team member, and they really become a part of your team long-term. And that's what we provide at REVA Global. So these are virtual assistants that join your team for either 20 hours per week dedicated or 40 hours per week dedicated. We have some project hires you can do. I can discuss those later, but we do have some of that. But most of our clients want that long-term relationship with a virtual assistant. It helps, right? They become better and better at their role because you're able to grow them as an employee, essentially, versus a singular project. Out there's like websites you can go to, though. I'll tell you, there's two major things you find. One is you'll find what I call wholesaling websites of virtual assistant resumes. And there's like thousands of resumes on there of all these virtual assistants. Or you'll post like a job that says, I need a virtual assistant. And like your inbox blows up with people saying, hire me, hire me. Those are not vetted virtual assistants. That's just resumes. It's on you to review them all, take the time to do a million interviews and try to find the right one. And then there are companies that will go to the extra effort to match you to the right VA. And that's what we do at REVA Global. And we have a whole very exclusive process for that. That's excellent.
Let's bring this around to real estate investors. And I know that you're a real estate investor as well. What tasks does a typical real estate investor do that they could outsource to a virtual assistant?
So there's hundreds of tasks. So I'll give you a couple of like our most commonly asked for ones on the investor side. And if everybody's listening with me, do an activity yourself in your mind for a moment and think about all the things that you do all day long. 90% of what we all do can be done by phone or computer. So if we all are truthful and honest with ourselves, it's true. And that means that almost up to 90% of what we do could be given to someone else to do. Okay, so as I list out my most common things, you'll see kind of a common theme here. One of the most common for real estate investors is outbound lead generation or cold calling, right? Actually calling motivated sellers, for example, actually calling to generate a buyer lead list for my wholesalers, very common. For buying property, calling motivated sellers, right? Or calling real estate agents, and doing that consistent outbound calling all day long, and then cultivating those relationships, doing outbound follow-up calling is huge. I talked to a guy yesterday, and this is what like the classic story on follow-up. All of us investors, we're busy, and we're managing projects and tenants and our business and our team members, and we got all this stuff going on. Some of us are doing it while balancing a W-2. And in all that process, the one thing that we know is the highest, most revenue generating activity, which is follow-up calls, is the one thing we all never put enough energy towards. And the reality is that you can increase your bottom line earnings from 40, 50, 60, 70% just simply by adding a follow-up system. We know it, but we don't oftentimes dedicate time and resources to it. Well, what if you had a VA and that's all they did was follow-up calls? So I mentioned that to a guy yesterday, and he hired a VA recently to do that, and they went up 40% in their gross earnings just from the follow-up. And these are leads that he would have never converted otherwise. So that's a big one.
Be specific about that. What does that mean, follow-up phone calls? And how does that work in reality?
All right, so let's say some of you are investors, and if you're like me, I do a lot of marketing to motivated sellers, right? So, our classic, the ones we always go after, and absentee owners and, board landlords, maybe pre-foreclosure, probate, whatever. We buy these lists. We put a bunch of energy into maybe direct mail or maybe having an initial cold call campaign done for us, and we generate leads, right? And leads are not always ready when we're ready, right? So we have to be ready when they're ready, right? And so they end up in our pipeline. And so we'll have, hundreds of people that may be connected with us, but they weren't ready to sell our house to us, the moment we talk to them. And so we put them into our database, and maybe we put them into an email drip sequence or some other type of automated follow-up, but they're not getting any kind of organic follow-up where we're actually calling them, leaving them a voicemail, trying to reach out to them. And we all know that if we do that, we'll connect with a lot of them and convert them when they're ready, right? So having a virtual assistant that just does that all day, dedicated, it's huge for your business, because you and I both know we're not likely to sit down and spend hours a day on the phone. We know we should be, but we don't always do it, right?
Well, I want to keep peeling this onion, though, because let's say you have your virtual assistant in the Philippines follow up, and they get through to this person who might, whatever it is, want to sell their house or whatever. How are they equipped to have that conversation?
A couple of different things. So first off, let me talk about what we do at REVA to help equip them. And then I'm going to tell you what you have to do as a client, right? So at REVA, first and foremost, we don't have, we're not a warehouse of resumes, right? So we actually hire virtual assistants in the Philippines, and they become part of our permanent staff. We're very different in the virtual assistant world. And we seek out talent that is going to fit the needs of our clients. And we have a large client base that needs VAs to be on the phone. And that means a certain type of disc profile. This is a type of personality that loves to be on the phone. They love to engage with people. This is also someone who has high language proficiency. We obviously want them to be able to communicate well in English and not sound like they're in a foreign country, which also means that they need to have the technology support and so forth for what they do, so that, again, the connectivity and everything sounds like somebody that really can engage with the homeowner. So we do a lot of that, plus give them some pre-trainings, weeks of pre-trainings actually, that they have to pass to be eligible to be a REVA Global VA. And that includes American culture, investor terminology, basic scripting, basic objective handling, and so forth. So they really have a good foundation. And then the last thing is, a lot of our VAs have call center experience, because in the Philippines, that's one of the major employers there. And so we find that out in the hiring process, and those that have high call center experience also make a good fit for someone needing follow-up calling. So that's on us. So if we place you with one, we've upped the odds that you're going to have a good engagement for follow-up. But now on you, the client, you've got to provide how you want us to talk to your follow-up leads. So we have some basic scripting we teach, but we are you. We need to know what you want us to say. So you do want to supply some scripts and supply some very short, quick progress trainings on how you would want the VA to submit the lead information into your CRM or submit to one of your team members. What process do you want them to follow? And the VA will learn that and do it the way you need it done. And for every client, that's different.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. Sometimes the client may not understand what it is they want or even how to keep track of what they want. So are you also advising on, say, like CRM, customer relationship software?
Managers, whatever they call those, yeah.
Yeah, I like to make sure I like to make sure our listeners know what we're talking about. But CRM software systems that you would use, and then maybe is it up to the customer to provide the script, or do you have best practices that REVA Global is already aware of?
So it's a little mix of both, right? So if you're wanting to hire a VA and you don't know where to start, that's probably the most common issue we have as a company. You guys call us and you're not ready to hire a VA because really you haven't figured out what you want to have the VA do. And that's number one, right? And before we even get to scripting and, do you want them to actually cold call and do follow-up calls, or do you want them to do admin work or bookkeeping or social media management or tenant screenings or tenant tenant advertisements for rental properties that you're looking for a tenant for. What is it that you need, right? So that first process has to happen. And so oftentimes when you call us, that's really where you're at first, is like, I'm not really quite sure what I want to outsource or delegate. And so we do have a sort of a strategy session process that we'll go through with a client to help them sort of figure out what that is. We have a long list of tasks that we give the clients that are an idea list, basically, or we've listed out hundreds of tasks that our VAs do for our clients, and it helps them to think about all the things that, oh, wow, I could take that off my shoulders. Yeah, you so could, right? And so that helps them decide. And then our strategy team takes that, helps them figure out what's the best virtual assistant fit for that. Because, for instance, I have a team member here at my brokerage, one of my agents. He loves being on the phone. Now, I don't, but he loves it. And so he wants to make the acquisition calls because that's what he's best at. That's his strength. We play to our strengths, not our weaknesses, right? So he doesn't really want to be able to do that, but he is horrible at details, paperwork, social media management, bookkeeping. He can't do any of that stuff. And so he's this extroverted, get me on the phone guy, but he needs somebody else to do the lead entries and update the lead notes and all those things. So he has a VA assigned to him, or he hires one full time, that's the right personality fit for that type of work. And they're more of an introvert, high detail person who loves to be a task managed, if you will. And so that's the perfect fit for him, whereas somebody else might want somebody to make follow-up calls for them, and so forth. So we go through that process. As far as CRMs or software tools you're going to use, it's really the decision of the client. We might share with the client, hey, I know other clients of REVA are using these things. You could take a look at those. And some of them, like the Mojo dialer system or 5-9 dialing, or things like RealFlow or Podio or applications like that, a lot of our clients use those. So a lot of our virtual assistant base have some basic experience with them, but ultimately the client kind of has to decide that so that we can follow what they want us to follow.
I know you just gave us a list of different functions that the virtual assistants can do, but I'd like to dig into that list a little bit more, because for our listeners who are kind of thinking to themselves, do I need a virtual assistant? Where could they help me out? I'd really like to give them and myself some ideas on where a virtual assistant could fit into your business.
Okay, you might not expect this answer. So this is where we're going to start, though, okay? I have what I call my 4 quadrants of efficiency to help people determine what to have a VA do. And it takes a lot of introspection and some time spent as a business owner to first look at everything you're doing. Like, really look at all of it. Write it all down. How many of us do that? Do you write down everything you do in a day and how much time you spent doing each of those things? Do that first. And then take a look at everything that you're doing. And first, circle the things that are your strengths, that are the highest revenue generating activities that you really should be the one doing for your business. And those things you've got to set aside and keep. Everything else, be honest about it. What are you worth per hour? If you believe that you're going to make, or if you want to make $300,000 net this year, that's your goal as an investor, and you're doing work that's $10 an hour work, well, you're not going to have a $300,000 bank account. You're going to have a $10 an hour bank account because you're spending all of your time doing $10 an hour work. So, go through the list and highlight the things that can be done by somebody for less than what you have to earn per hour in your business. And then look at the things that frustrate you, that you procrastinate on, that you wish you didn't have to do, right? And those are the things that you want to figure out how to outsource or eliminate, automate, or outsource. So here's my 4 quadrants. It's what can you eliminate once you do all that? Get rid of a bunch of stuff. There's probably a lot of stuff on there you shouldn't be doing at all. Get rid of it. Secondly, what can you find a technology application to use to automate? Right? Is there a tool out there that's cheap per month, or maybe free even, that can help automate that task? Thirdly, what can you outsource to a virtual assistant? And fourthly, whatever's left that isn't what you set aside as your highest and most important activity, that would be stuff you would delegate. So those are where you start to hire someone who's actually in your office, right? I do have 4 physical people who support me everybody, my virtual assistants are all physical too, but the difference being I have 4 W-2 type people who are here supporting me in all my businesses, but I have tons of virtual assistants also supporting me. So that delegation one, though, are things I can't give my virtual people. It's because it requires them to get in their car maybe and drive or do things physically here in my office location, if that makes sense. So that's where I tell people to start. Now we can go into a long list of ideas. I can totally spit that stuff out.
Yeah, I love the 4 quadrants that you just broke it down into, and that's very helpful. And you have a lot of conversations with clients and potential clients as to what they're looking for. What are some of the tasks that you find over and over again that clients want to automate?
So for our, let's go investors and let's say landlords and let's say property managers, since those are a lot of your listeners here. Investors most commonly would be the cold calling, lead generation, follow-up calling to leads that you've generated, buyer list creation. A lot of our wholesalers are looking to build their buyers list, building a list of agents to work with, contractor screening or setting up contractor bids is another big one. Writing offers, sending offers on things like Zillow, Craigslist, or Facebook Marketplace. Social media management is a big one. Content creation. Right now, lots of people requesting things like transcribing video because we're in a virtual space right now, very much so in the world. And so we're getting more and more requests for that. And so those are probably our top ones. So they're in the pool of lead generation, really. If I added one more, I'd say property marketing. So this would be, you have a property that you've just flipped and you want to try to sell it yourself. You need some property marketing done. It might be that you have a wholesale deal that you're trying to push out to your buyers list or get exposure and different things. We have a lot of REA guys they run the REA and they're also an investor and they want someone to help promote their events. Maybe you do events as investors. We teach classes, et cetera. That's probably our most common pool. Our landlords, I would add that they do that pool, and then it was add on top of that when they have a property that's vacant and they need to get a tenant for it, that oftentimes having the virtual assistants help do all the marketing for the tenant, and then to take the inbound calls, because we know how that is. So the inbound tenant applications and inbound calls, that can all be done with a virtual assistant, or they can go through a checklist of questions to help boil down to the ones that deserve to have a showing or should have a showing on a property. That can all be done by a virtual assistant. And then a lot for our landlords and our property managers are same thing on the contractor screening, getting contractor bids, chasing down to get the bid back. We all know how that works, right? We spend a lot of time making those phone calls, and that gets in the way of the rest of my business, and it's frustrating. But if a VA is doing that all day, so we got a bid for, gutters on a house, they can go and get 7 different guys to come out there and give a bid on gutters, and then they can follow up to get the bids back from all those 7 guys. And you didn't have to do any of that, right? So that is a big support for our property managers and our investors and landlords, and community managers too. We have some community management companies as well, same type of calling.
So many great examples there. I want to dig into a couple of them. Social media and content creation. Explain how that works.
Social media. We all love it. We have to be on it, right? I'm on it a ton. People are like, oh my gosh, you're on Facebook 24 hours a day. I'm like, no, I'm not. See, that's the whole power of virtual assistants. We have to be putting organic content out there pretty consistently. We might be doing some paid advertising as well on social media, but it's the organic stuff that has to be consistent in between. And again, we're busy running our businesses, and thinking about stopping in the middle of everything to post something doesn't always fit with the plan of the day. And the problem is that if we're not consistent on social media, which is what happens, then we don't get the engagement and the following and the conversions of business or followers that we could if we were consistent. So having someone who just does that, they're constantly posting on all of your platforms. And yes, I know there's tools out there that can automate some push type posting, but the reality is that you still have to create the content. There's not every tool to create everything for you. So if you have somebody that's just assigned to do that, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and so forth. On Instagram, they have to put it through a tool for you to push it to your Instagram accounts. But again, all you have to do is push a button instead of having to create it and write all the hashtags and all that other stuff. So this is somebody that just simply manages making sure that you're there. The other thing that they do is engagement. So when people comment back and forth on your posts, the way to get the highest reach and relevancy with social media platforms is to engage with the people who are engaging with you. Well, I don't have time all day to be commenting back and forth and tagging people back and forth and so forth. But a virtual assistant can avatar to do that for you. I'm sure all of you have experienced this. You got on Instagram and you wrote a comment and somebody commented back, like on a celebrity's profile. I guarantee you it's not the celebrity. It's a virtual assistant, right? So having a VA that just does that all day long can keep you highly engaged and keep your relevancy and reach very high without you necessarily having to be the party. The key is giving your VA a good editorial calendar to follow. And just, on Mondays, I want you to post about a before and after picture on a house, and maybe on Tuesdays I want you to post a news article, maybe on Wednesdays I want you to post something else, right? If you give them something to go by, then they can take that off your shoulders. So it's huge, right?
So that kind of feeds into the next question I'm going to ask you about content. A lot of people who create content or do social media quite often want to have control over the message they're putting out there. So how do you make sure with a virtual assistant that they're not saying something they shouldn't say or that's incorrect or putting out the wrong representation?
Yeah. So you'll have to give your VA some guidelines, right? Like you might want to, for instance, something I do. We have a client that we create a lot of quote cards, or kind of, they look like memes, right? It's like quote cards, and it's his picture, and he's got text next to him, whatever. And so we have the client submits once a week a list of quotes he wants to say. And what he does is and I say submits a list, he records his voice and he sends the audio file to the VA. And so he doesn't have to do anything. He can be driving in the car and he thinks of some cool thing he wants to say, right? I want to say this, right? And then she takes that, she transcribes that audio file, and now she has what to put on those graphic assets and what to say in the content above it. And he gives her a few additional guidelines of, these are the hashtags I want you to use. These are the people I want you to tag in my posts, right? So you guys will want to have some guidance for the VA, and be organic about it. It takes a couple of weeks to kind of get into a role, and then once you do, you'll start seeing results. But give them some guidance.
So Amy, can you take us through kind of a strategy session that you might have with a client that you're onboarding? Like, what's the process you take them through? And also, you talked about the 4 quadrants. Do you have anything that our listeners would be able to download to kind of help them walk through that process? For
a typical strategy session, we're going to do some of the same things I've kind of talked about on this call with you today, is that we're going to ask you right away, what do you want to have a VA do? And like I said, at least, 80% of the time, the answer is, I'm not quite sure, right? So we go through the same set of questions, what would you mostly like to outsource? What are your goals, right? And to see if we can help you come to a place where you can decide what a VA can do for you. And then we also, we mentioned that we have a long list of tasks that we provide most of our people in a strategy session to help them go through and get excited, kind of expand their entrepreneurial mind, if you will, on all the things that they didn't realize they could offload that they can, or to kind of hit the mindset piece of that, to give them permission, if you will, to themselves to say, oh, you know what, I don't have to do that myself. I could actually give that to someone else. And so there's a very empowering process that we go through in that strategy session. And then we'll be very honest back. If you say to us, no, I clearly want to have someone do outbound cold calling, well, then we have the conversation about a personality profile mixes and so forth. Once you're ready, once you're actually ready to hire a VA, then we go through the interview process. We select a few, we meet with you a couple more times. We select a couple of VAs from our pool, and then we let you do an interview with them. That's a co-interview with one of our operations team, because we don't just give you one VA, we really give you a whole team of VAs that are also helping support your VA at all times, and they're supporting their engagement, and they're supporting their interaction with you. They're affirming them and motivating them, and making sure that you feel the same. So you get a whole team, not just a VA.
You mentioned this twice, and I want to dig into this a little bit more. You mentioned the DISC process and personality profiling. This is a process you take the VAs through to see where they fit in, whether they're good phone people or more maybe data entry type people. Talk about that process, because I always find that interesting, the personality profiling.
Yeah, it's so crucial, right? Like you know, what's the phrase? Was that Einstein said, you know, if you ask a fish to climb a tree, you'll both be frustrated, right? I think that's how it goes, something like that, right? And I think as business owners, we're all guilty of that. We hire someone and we hope that they can do the tasks we want them to do, but the reality is it doesn't fit their personality. And so you're going to end up both frustrated, right? They don't enjoy what they're doing and you don't enjoy the results you're getting. And it's simply because you asked a fish to climb a tree, or you asked an introvert to do extroverted tasks, or you asked a person who's not high detail, who doesn't like to sit behind a computer, to do high detailed tasks. So we do a lot to profile the VAs so that we know their strengths, weaknesses, their background experiences, and what they would be most prolific at based upon personality. For example, a cold caller will have a disc profile of a high D, high I. So they're very extroverted. They love engaging with people, but they're not good on the C and the S, right? Because those are detail-oriented type tasks. So,
and for our listeners who don't even know what the DISC process is, it's a personality profiling where you have the DISC. And what does the D and the I and the S and the C stand for?
Yeah, D is your level of dominance. And so people who tend to be highly extroverted tend to be high on the D, right? An introvert will tend to be low on the D. Same thing with I.
So I is inspirational, influencing, inducing, impressive, interactive, and interesting.
And then C are people these are your attention to detail people. And I think it's compliance. So with C, if somebody is very high on the C, they like to follow tasks, follow systems, follow processes. They are all about the process. And usually you're going to affirm them in their role because they got the process done. That makes them so happy. And so you want a high C person for like a bookkeeper, for example, right? They're not necessarily highly creative. Okay. So that might not be a great person for social media management, right? Or content creation, right? And then I think the last one, the S is steadiness, I think is the word.
Yeah, S would be submissive, stable, steady, sentimental, shy, status quo specialist.
Yeah, there we go. So this is an introvert. This is somebody that's a long-term hire. This is someone that likes to follow. Again, it's a high task manager person. This is somebody that, will stay with the role for a long time. So again, your high S, high C persons, these are going to be your good operations persons, right? These are your bookkeepers, your admin, your database management people, your Excel, they do macro formulas on Excel spreadsheets and they love it, right? Whereas these high D, high I guys are going to be your salesmen. These are your car salesmen. These are your get me on the phone. I want to have fun, but don't ask them to do a lot of reporting because that's not their game. So we highly profile the VAs because I don't want you to have that experience of being frustrated with the result and they're frustrated with their job. I want you to have a long-term retention experience, right? And so we kind of profile you too, by the way. You asked, well, what happens in a strategy session? Well, we're also asking questions to kind of dig deeper on the client, right? Because we need to know what your personality is like, I don't want to place you with a VA, again, that's going to be a bad mix for your personality. So we go through quite a bit of steps in that strategy and hiring process so that our clients have a win at the end of it. That's our goal anyway.
Thanks, Amy, for explaining that. And just for our listeners who aren't watching this on YouTube, and by the way, we have the YouTube video of this up. The book that we're talking about and the process we're talking about, it's the DISC, personality profiling. The book itself that I'm holding right in my hand is The Positive Personality Profiles by Robert A. Rohm, R-O-H-M. So if you want to check that out yourself, I got this off of Amazon.
And I'll give a plug to someone that I just know. His name's Gary Harper. If anybody that's listening follows Gary, Gary actually teaches like EOS systems, like Traction. If anybody's read the book Traction, if you haven't read that and you're on here, you must read the book Traction. You must implement it. But Gary loves EOS systems, and he has disprofiled hundreds of investors and all of their team members, and taken all that data and boiled it down to this profile fits this role best. It's really cool. So if you don't follow him or wanted to find out a little bit more how he does that, I'll let you guys explore that on your own. But disprofiling could be very powerful for determining the right roles for the right people for sure.
It's not just for hiring people, it's for understanding the people in your life who you come in contact with all the time.
Yes, or even just understanding yourself. How many of, I bet some of us that are listening, you haven't profiled yourself, and you might be shocked at what you come up as.
It's always scary to profile yourself. I always find myself seeing a little bit in each of those.
Oh yeah, me too. And there's a range. So if you do a disc profile and if you go online and you actually go pay to do one and you do the bigger, broader one, it gives you a scale. It tells you you're this percent D and this percent S or this percent C. So you will have a little bit of each, but you'll range higher on one over the other. And then that's how you determine what you are.
That's very helpful understanding the personality profile. I'm wondering, I always love horror stories or just stories like, do you have examples of people who have hired a virtual assistant and things have gone terribly wrong? And then after that, we'll talk about when they've gone incredibly well too. But any horror stories you can share with us?
Big horror stories, yes. I think some of so there's a couple common horror stories I've heard more than once. And that's simply that they've hired a VA and then the VA is like moonlighting for like 10 other investors at the same time. And they don't tell you this. And so you think that they're working for you, but they're not. Like they're doing like a minute here, a minute there, but they're billing you for 4 hours of time. Well, they're really working for 10 guys at one time. So they're just not dedicated to you. So you hear that a lot. And then I hear the one where like the VA disappears. Right. And so they hire a VA and then they think that the VA is doing this work and then they just don't. And a lot of times it comes down to the investors not being very proactive about staying engaged with their VA, which we don't allow at REVA. We do so much to help you stay engaged with your virtual assistants. I hear that a lot, but you know what? The VAs have their horror stories too. So like they'll hire they'll think that a client's hired them or investors hired them and they'll do a bunch of work and then the investor never pays them or, so forth or forgets about them, et cetera. It doesn't give them long-term work, even though they promised long-term work.
What about the security of information? Because I'd imagine VAs might sometimes come across some private information or maybe like social security numbers or whatever. How do you make sure that you're keeping the proper amount of security that's necessary with this information?
Right. And I will say, so we have, in our client service agreement, we have some language that addresses that between us and the client. But it is between you and the VA. You are employing a team member, so no different than you would have potentially a privacy policy or a process that you want secure documents handled by with somebody that worked in your office. You would want to have exactly the same policies with the VA. Right? So if you want them to run certain types of information through an encrypted document transfer process or electronic signature tool or something like that, then you need to make sure that you have those tools available for the VA to use that you want them to use and follow the process that you have. And that's really, really key. So you asked something very important. I have a VA that's done some personal assistant type work for me. And they're trained. They know how to, when I travel in a normal time, they can book plane tickets and do different things, buy tickets for events for me and things like that. Obviously, they're working with my credit card information, right? So I have put in some things just to make sure I protect that process with them and how I handle that. So you each want to make sure that you're doing the same.
Yeah, I'm sure anyone who's listening to this and is considering hiring a virtual assistant is also wondering, well, how much does it cost? So I'm sure there's a price range depending on the type of task, the level of expertise that your virtual assistant might have. But what are some of the costs that should be considered?
I'm going to revisit a mindset thing because I think this is a really important when people think about hiring a VA. First of all, I always encourage my clients never to look at the VA as a cost. And even when we apply automation tools and so forth to our businesses, I don't look at them as cost. I look at them as an investment. And what return will I get on that investment, right? So earlier we talked about how, if you want $300,000 a year, you can't do $10 an hour work or you'll never get there, right? So I look at that with virtual assistants as well. So first thing I want everybody to think about is that when you look at all the stuff that you're doing, and a large percentage of it is stuff that you shouldn't be doing and you could have a VA do, look at how much of your time that is. So let's say 80% of your time is being spent doing things that aren't the highest and best use of you. That's that $10 an hour type stuff. And 20% of your time you earned, let's say $100,000 last year, only working on your business to make $100,000, 20%. Imagine that if you could give half your time back, how much more you would make. Well, if I gave myself 40% of that 80% of that time back to myself. So now 60% of my time is being spent earning. Now I'm making $300,000 a year. I just gave myself a major raise really, really quickly simply by outsourcing, right? So I tell people first, do that activity first, because that will help get you into the right mindset and frame yourself as how you're going to go invest in a virtual assistant. And by the way, you're investing in a human, a person, personality with a family, and they have dreams and goals, and they're just like us, right? And so you're also investing in them. And so you want this to be a long-term investment for both. And so I say that first. Everybody do that with me if you haven't. But what costs you want to have? You have the cost of the VA. And so at REVA Global, we have hiring a part-time or full-time VA in packages. And then we have a couple of other packages that are hard to go into on this call, but if somebody wanted to call and do a strategy session, we could explain those. But most of our clients hire a part-time or full-time. And part-time at REVA Global comes out to $10.60 an hour. For that VA who's dedicated to you, they are not allowed to moonlight. They work for you 100% the entire block of time. And they're being checked in all day by a management team. So 3 different management levels are checking in with them all day long in addition to you, which is awesome. So we know that they're engaging, working, and getting results and turning in reports for you at start and end of business. And then you have the investment of tools that you want the VA to use. So for instance, some of my CRM tools that I use, I have to add my virtual assistant as a user. So one tool I use, for example, every user I add is $49 a month. That's what it costs. So every time I add a VA to that tool, I'm absorbing the investment of another $49 towards my goal. And so I first measure that I'm going to invest, that investment's going to make me more. And if it does, then I'll gladly hire another VA, add them to the tool that they need, and move forward. So that's what it breaks down to. If you hire a full-time VA with us, it comes out to $9.60 an hour, and it is a commitment. And we bill every 2 weeks, biweekly.
So part-time would be, what's the range of hours?
Yeah, it's 20 hours per week for a part-time VA. It comes out to just a little over $800 a month commitment. And full-time VA is 40 hours per week, and it comes out to just a little bit over $1,500 a month commitment. But that's 40 pure hours for you. This is not a hire in your office who might be filing their nails in between calls. This is a VA that's literally pushing out work for you the entire 40 hours if that's what you've given them to do, right? Which that's on you too. Like I have a VA right now. She's not doing anything at this moment. It's my fault because I actually gave her a lot, but she did it so quickly that she didn't have anything to do, right? So I was like, okay, so the next round of the project, I'm going to go ahead and hand her. But for the moment, while I'm talking to you, she's just sitting still.
What other success stories can you share with us where people have employed a virtual assistant and has really propelled their business?
I think of 2 right off the top of my head. There's a client, a woman in South Florida of ours, and she owns some rental properties. She does some flipping, and she's also licensed. She's a licensed broker. So it's kind of similar to me in a way. Her virtual assistants, this is the coolest thing. She has a whole process where they use the county court records to get opportunities. So they go after code violations, evictions, and condemnation orders, pulling it directly off the online court system. She has the VA do that. The VA skip traces, reaches out, finds the homeowners, talks to them, follows up until they get them, follows up until they're ready to get an offer made on their property. They comp the property. They follow a formula that she's given them. They write the offer. They submit the offer. They literally do everything. She doesn't know about it until the seller's ready for them to come take a look at the house. It's amazing. And what's so cool is that she's scaled up by having that VA train other VAs to join the team. So she doesn't even train the new VAs. She just said, yeah, it's time to add one. And then she just sits back, and then that VA does all the work to train the new VA to do what they're doing. And so it's just this beautiful little process. And if you get to meet her, she's awesome. She doesn't believe in working more than 4 hours a day. Like that's just her philosophy of life. And so
the VA or the client?
The client. Okay. So the client just doesn't, she's like, I'm not working more than 4 hours a day. I got stuff to do. I got to go outside and enjoy life. So that's why she manages her VAs in that capacity. And then I thought of one other one. I have a real estate agent that recently hired a VA. They had 2,800 leads that they had paid for through Zillow and Realtor.com. So these are expensive leads that they had paid for. I think it was Trulia and Realtor.com. And those territories cost a couple $1,000s a month. So for a year or so, they've been paying a ton of money per month to generate all these leads. And they weren't doing any follow-up calls at all. None, right? The leads were coming in. If they weren't immediately ready to transact, they were just going in the pool. And so I got him to hire a virtual assistant. Well, in fact, he was a coaching client of mine. And I basically said, we won't do another coaching session together until you've hired a VA. And so he did. And he had the VA start doing follow-up calls to that database of 2,800. And within the first week of them really getting in the gel of following his process, how he wanted it done, that VA got somebody who was ready to transact, and he closed a deal 30 days later with that contact. And the net commission that he earned on that transaction covered the cost of that VA for 2 years. So now basically he has a free employee for 2 years, if you look at it that way.
Yeah, you talk about mindset and the consultation you do with potential clients. For our listeners who are interested in what you're talking about, what else could you say to them to like help them get over that hump? Because I know I have this mental obstacle of just knowing, okay, if I'm going to show a VA how to do something, I might as well just do it myself. What else can you say to help us get past that?
So every time you go to do something, ask yourself a couple questions. A, what could do this for me instead? B, who could do this for me instead? And 3, remind yourself what it is that you are worth per hour. It's different for everybody, but what do you have to earn per hour to reach the net goal at the end of the year that you would like to have as a business owner, right? Ask yourself those 3 questions. If you do that in front of everything that you do, then you won't let yourself do it yourself. You will push yourself into a position to say, I want to make that, and this is getting in the way of me doing that. So I'm going to go find the what or the who to do that for me. And so when we start operating in that way, all of a sudden we're able to scale 10 times faster than we imagined. But you have to put yourself through that exercise each time that you sit down to do something. Because I'm that way. I'm very personality driven to, I'll just do it myself because nobody can do it better than me. Or I don't have time to train somebody. I just need to do it real quick and get it done. I don't have time to train someone. Well, how many times do I do that in a month? That might lead to 20 hours of my life that I spent quickly doing something that I didn't have the time to train someone else. And I could take the time to train someone else and get 20 hours a month back of my life, right? So think about, what do you clearly want? Because those things are oftentimes getting in the way of what that is.
And Amy, as we wrap it up here, do you have any other advice or parting thoughts for our listeners?
I say hire virtual assistants ASAP. I say take some time today, right now, where you have time. Pay attention, start the process of writing down what you're doing. And really be honest with yourself and say, how much could I take off my plate? We'd love to send you our list of tasks that will help you creatively think through stuff that you could outsource. And like I said, you'll look at all the tasks on there and you'll be like, oh, I never thought about giving that to a virtual assistant. We're like, yeah, right? And so that'll help get those creative juices flowing. And then our team can step in when you're ready and do a session, 15-minute call just to kind of get a little bit more idea of what you're trying to do and take it from there.
And how would people get a hold of you to find out more about your services or to get that list that you just mentioned?
So I'm going to give everybody 3 things, not to confuse things, but it depends on where you're at in your mindset right now. If you wanted to send me a personal question, you're welcome to do that. It's amy@revaglobal.com. I do have, again, a virtual assistant who does help fulfill the replies, but please go ahead and email me. Secondly, you can go to revaglobal.com. That is our website. Go there. We have a live chat available that you can immediately live chat and ask questions. And there are a lot of resources on there that might support you. Other podcasts we've done and different just ways to opt in and get that list that I mentioned. You can also go to revastrategy.com and go there right now and schedule a 15-minute session. But don't wait. Just go there immediately, schedule 15 minutes. The team member that talks with you, she's awesome. She's our first connection with you. She's unbelievable. You'll think she's here in the United States, and she's not. She's also in the Philippines. And people ask me all the time, where did you find her? She's awesome. I'm like, yeah, she doesn't live in Atlanta. But go there. So that's your 3 things. If you just want to message me. If you want to just get some general information or you're ready right now to pull the trigger, do one of those three things and let's connect.
Well, Amy, I want to thank you for having this conversation. I mean, it's great to get your perspective on hiring virtual assistants, the mindset that you have to kind of offload some of these duties that we don't even think that, hey, other people could be doing this for us. Right. It makes a lot of sense. So thank you so much for having this conversation with us.
Yeah, no, I am so honored to be on here. Thank you. There's a big passion of mine is passive income, and all of y'all are playing in that pool. And this is, this can help you guys do even more of that. So thank you. I appreciate it.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.